it says, the effectual fervent prayer of a righteous man avails. Now, I just out of interest looked at the original Greek of this, where it says effectual fervent in English. It simply indicates the powerful prayer of a righteous man. It's the very strong, forceful prayer of a righteous man that avails. And what we have to learn is that we have to apply this kind of praying. It's not just any kind of praying. It has to be very strong prayer to avail. In the Greek, what it does is, instead of saying effectual fervent, it uses the word dunamos, which we translate as dynamo or dynamic, and or dynamite. So this, what I'm trying to show you is that weak praying won't be effective. You've got to pray with a belief that God is going to answer, and the prayer has got to be dynamic, like a dynamo or dynamite, an explosive. And you know, dynamite as an explosive, if anybody knows, is unusual in that if you take dynamite and put it down against a wall, it doesn't waste its energy in the air, it pushes the wall down. So dynamite has a specific use. And this is where the apostle is really saying that prayer has to be like this, effective. So I want you to understand what prayer can achieve, what prayer can do. But it's more than this, because if I turn you in another scripture, if I go back, it was last week in speaking that I was referring to John 14. And in John 14, there's two things. One is, I was saying last time, the first verse, let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe in me. A challenge to us in what we're going through, which are difficult, troublesome times, that our hearts shouldn't be troubled, because God is in control, and literally God has prophesied. God knows the future. And when God speaks prophetically, and the majority of the Old Testament is prophetic, when God speaks prophetically, he's not speaking about so much a future, now I want you to understand this, as a past, because God lives in the future. I don't know how to explain this. God doesn't just live in the present. God lives in past, present, and future. There is no time with God. In fact, if you go back to Genesis, God created time when he said the evening and the morning were the first day. So actually, God is speaking about something he has seen, he sees, he knows. And therefore, it's so important to come back to that. And I'm going back to it in John 14. Don't be troubled, because God knows the future. God knows the past, but he also knows the future. We need to be warned, because if we take Scripture in its right context, even Jesus is using it as a warning. And when amongst the Jews, Paul and Peter and the others who were Jews, were preaching to Jews, they would quote Scripture, because Jesus was the fulfillment of prophecy. And the tragedy with the early Jews was that They understood the prophecy. They read the prophecy. They lived in the prophecy. But they didn't accept that Jesus was the fulfillment of prophecy. And that was the early teaching of the disciples. Jesus is the fulfillment of your scripture. And even today, the message of the church is that everything, even what's happening around us, wars, rumors of wars, even the threat of a third world war, is only the fulfillment of prophecy in the scripture. And we need to be aware of this. But even if you don't understand all the prophecies, all Jesus put it was like this. He said, don't be troubled, let not your heart be troubled. Because as believers, our faith, our trust is in God. That God is preparing us. God is taking care of us. And so this is why when I come back to the subject of prayer, because at the end of John 14, in verse 12, Jesus sums it up and he says, "Truly I say to you, he that believes on me, the works that I do will he do, and greater works than these, because I go to my Father." And I've seen that literally fulfilled. And in verse 13, "Whatever you ask the Father in my name, that will I do." So actually Jesus himself is saying he will answer prayer. He says, "Whatever you ask the Father in my name, I will do it." So in actual fact, Jesus himself helps to enact and bring about the answer to prayer. Why? So that the Father might be glorified in the Son. And in verse 14, it's so simple. "If you ask anything in my name, I will do it." So when we're praying, we need to have this confidence. We need to have this absolute confidence in God's power to answer. And in my life, one of the things I've tried to demonstrate is this fact that God does answer prayer. And come on, look, there are many religions and many gods, and people pray to all sorts of religions, and there's one specific religion which you all know about, which is the main opposing religion to Christianity, where they're praying all the time. They have to pray 3 times a day or 4 times a day or whatever it is. They have to be very strict in their observance of prayer. But the difference is the God they're praying to can't answer.